They still talk about it up on Arrowhead Ridge, usually after the third beer when the fire's low. They don't use names, just call it the Footprint Cabin. They say if you listen close on a rainy night, you can still hear, well, best not to talk about what you might hear. Especially not about the mud that appears where no mud should be. But for Evan and Lila Hayes, arriving that crisp October afternoon, it was just the Haven. The name charmingly burned into a wooden sign swinging from a pine branch. Newly married, high on a future that felt limitless, they craved this isolation. The rental agent, a folksy woman named Martha, had chuckled when handing over the keys. It's private, all right, real private. Haven't had renters up there since, well, a while. Likes its peace, that cabin does. Evan hadn't caught the slight hesitation then. The cabin itself was perfect. Rough-hewn logs, a stone fireplace big enough to walk into, and windows that looked out onto nothing but dense, silent forest. It was tucked miles down a rutted dirt road off the main highway, a place where cell signal died a slow, crackling death. Exactly what they wanted. Their first day and night passed in a blissful blur of unpacking, exploring the immediate woods, finding nothing more unusual than a strangely symmetrical ring of white stones Lila thought was quaint. Building a crackling fire and falling asleep tangled together under a thick quilt, the Milky Way sharp and brilliant through the skylight. Lila traced constellations on Evan's back. "It feels like we're the only two people left in the world," she whispered. "Isn't that the point?" Evan murmured back, pulling her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair and wood smoke. The second day brought the rain. Not a gentle shower, but a sudden furious downpour that started mid-afternoon while they were attempting a longer hike. The sky turned bruised purple, and the rain hit the canopy above like angry drumbeats, soaking them through in minutes. They laughed, slipping and sliding on the rapidly dissolving trail back to the Haven, eager for dry clothes and hot chocolate. They burst through the door, dripping and shivering, kicking off their muddy boots on the welcome mat. Evan went straight for the fireplace, coaxing the embers back to life. Lila headed for the bathroom to towel off. She screamed Evan's name a moment later, not a playful shriek, but a sharp, choked sound that made the hairs on his neck prickle. He found her standing frozen just inside the living room, pointing a trembling finger. Leading from the front door, past the welcome mat where their own boots sat, was a trail of muddy footprints. Dark, wet, clay-like mud, the same thick, sucking mud from the trail, smeared across the polished hardwood floor. Evan felt a chill despite the growing fire. "Okay, wow, we must have tracked that in worse than I thought." Lila shook her head, her eyes wide. "No, Evan, look." He looked closer. His stomach tightened. There were two distinct sets of prints. One was large, clearly made by a heavy work boot, much bigger than his own hiking boots. The other set was stranger. Smaller, almost slender, but oddly long. And somehow, despite the mud, they looked almost delicate. Neither matched the tread patterns of their own soaked footwear sitting by the door. Worse, the prints led in from the threshold, tracked across the living room rug, skirted the couch, and then just stopped. Right in the middle of the floor. There were no prints leading back to the door. No prints leading anywhere else. They just began at the door and ended in empty space. Maybe the previous renters? Evan offered, the explanation sounding weak even to him. Maybe old mud got wet again somehow. "Evan, it rained for the first time today," Lila said, her voice tight. "This mud is fresh, and who walks into a cabin and just vanishes from the middle of the room?" They checked the windows. Locked. The back door. Bolted from the inside. The small cellar door in the kitchen pantry. Padlocked, coated in dust. There was no other way in or out. That night, the easy comfort was gone. They tried to laugh it off. "Maybe Martha's peaceful cabin has muddy ghosts," Evan joked, but his voice lacked conviction. They double-checked the locks, wedged a chair under the front doorknob, and slept fitfully, jolting awake at every creak of the settling logs or gust of wind-driven rain against the glass. Lila insisted she heard footsteps circling the cabin, muffled by the downpour, but Evan heard nothing but the storm. The third morning dawned gray and damp. The footprints were still there, slightly drier now, mocking their fear. They spent the day deliberately trying to reclaim their honeymoon, staying close, talking about everything but the mud. But the tension was a third presence in the cabin. As dusk bled into night, they were cleaning up after dinner when Lila gasped. She was staring at the floor near the hallway that led to their bedroom. New footprints. This time they started near where the others had stopped. 2 sets identical to the first, still wet, glistening darkly on the wood. They led down the short hallway, past the bathroom door, and stopped abruptly, inches from their closed bedroom door. Silence hammered in Evan's ears. The rain had stopped. The forest outside was utterly still. They were inside again, Lila whispered, backing away until she hit the kitchen counter. While we were here. How, Evan? How? There was no explanation. No sound had been made. No locks were broken. They searched the cabin again, top to bottom, hearts pounding, finding nothing. Absolutely nothing. Evan didn't pretend to rationalize it this time. He grabbed the heavy iron poker from the fireplace, its weight a small, inadequate comfort. He told Lila to lock herself in the bedroom, but she refused, staying glued to his side, her face pale. He stayed awake all that night, perched on the edge of the armchair, poker across his knees, straining to hear anything over the frantic thudding of his own heart. He watched the shadows thrown by the dying firelight, convinced they were moving. Once he thought he saw a flicker of movement outside the main window, a shape darker than the trees, but when he threw open the curtains, there was only the impenetrable blackness of the woods. Nothing came. Nothing he could see or hear. The 4th night would be their last at the Haven. Exhaustion was fraying them both. They barely spoke, communicating in hushed tones and nervous glances. Sleep was impossible. Around 1 a.m., the tapping started. Soft at first, like fingernails on glass. Tap, tap, tap. On the kitchen window. Evan froze, poker held tight. Lila stifled a whimper, then louder. On the living room window. Tap, tap, tap. Deliberate, paced, then on the walls. A dull, resonant thump, 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 moving along the exterior log walls, circling the cabin. At 2:13 a.m., Lila grabbed Evan's arm, her nails digging in. "I hear it," she breathed, barely audible. Breathing. Right outside the bedroom door. Evan strained his ears. Under the thumping, under his own ragged breath, he heard it too. A slow, wet, raspy inhale and exhale, like someone struggling for air or something trying to mimic it. Adrenaline surged, fear battling rage. He stood up, yanked the bedroom door open, and shone his high-powered flashlight beam into the hallway. Empty. Nothing. Just the dark wood floor. And the footprints. The 2 sets of muddy prints were inside the bedroom now. They led from the doorway, across the rug, right up to the foot of their bed, stopping cold inches from the quilt. They didn't get back into bed. They huddled together on the far side of the room, backs against the cold log wall, watching the doorway, watching the footprints until the first weak gray light of dawn filtered through the window. Evan's eyes burned with exhaustion. His muscles ached from tension. He finally slumped against the wall, letting his heavy eyelids droop for what felt like only a second. Just a moment to gather himself before they fled this place at first light. When he snapped his eyes open again, maybe seconds later, maybe a minute, he could never be sure. The early morning light filled the room more fully. Lila was gone. He scrambled upright, his heart seizing. "Lila? Lila." No reply, no sound of struggle, no scream. The bedroom door was still closed as they'd left it. The windows were locked. He scanned the room frantically. And then he saw them. The footprints. The 2 sets still led to the bed. But now, a single set, the larger boot-like prints, led away from Lila's side of the bed. They tracked across the floor, over the older prints, heading not towards the door, not towards the window, but straight towards the solid log wall at the far end of the room. And there, against the wood, they simply vanished. as if whoever or whatever had made them had walked directly into the solid wall. Lila's prints never left the bedside. The authorities found Evan hours later, sitting catatonically on the porch steps staring into the trees. The official investigation was thorough but yielded nothing. No forced entry, no signs of struggle, no blood, no fibers, no DNA other than Evan's and Lila's. The only physical evidence was the mud. Samples taken confirmed it was identical to the soil outside, and the bizarre, inexplicable footprints, photographed from every angle, measured meticulously. 2 sets leading in and around the cabin. 1 larger set leading from the bed into a solid wall. None ever leading out. Evan told them everything, his voice cracking, recounting the prints, the sounds, the breathing, Lila's disappearance. They listened, skepticism warring with the undeniable physical evidence of the prints. He spoke of whispers on the edge of hearing, figures half seen in the peripheral vision, the suffocating sense of being watched. His story never changed, but under intense questioning, exhaustion and grief made him seem frantic, unreliable. He was never charged. There was nothing to charge him with. But the whispers followed him from Arrowhead Ridge, the suspicion in people's eyes. He lost his job. His friends drifted away. He was never free. Locals say he still drives up that rutted road once a year, usually in the fall, around the time the rains start. He parks where the cell signal dies and walks the rest of the way. He just stands there on the porch of the empty, decaying cabin, the haven, the footprint cabin, staring at the silent trees, or sometimes at the walls themselves, waiting, listening, not for Lila's voice, but for the soft, squelching sound of fresh mud appearing where no mud should be, for the first tap on the window, for the footsteps that arrive but never leave.